All right, so it is time for us to begin. If you want to go ahead and turn in your Bibles over to Judges chapter 15, that's where we're going to pick up this morning in our study. And notice we've got a few visitors with us today. We're glad to see you. Happy to have you guys here with us. And I won't dwell on it, but I will say, because I think I need it this morning, is I've struggled getting ready for class today. So I'd appreciate the help. This morning. So let's go to God in prayer. Our God, Father in heaven, we thank you for who you are. That you are our God and our Creator. That we can lean on you in tough times. Father, we ask that you be with us this morning. We know, Father, that there is no better place for us to be than together and in your word. Please help us to know you. Please help us to remember who you are. And that we will leave this place remembering who we are. We ask these things in Christ's name. Amen. Sorry about that. One thing I do want to say as we get started with this study this morning, this is the last time we're going through the cycle of the Judges today. So this is looking at the second part of Samson and his life that he's lived. And Samson is one of those guys. He's a complicated character in this book. I think there's a lot of mixed things when it comes to Samson as we get through some of this stuff. But I do want to bring this up. It's been a little while since we brought up kind of the outline of the whole book of Judges as we get to the end of these things. And actually, I forgot to mention this. But yeah, we're rounding out the cycles of Judges with Samson here. And then we really switch gears a little bit next week. And one of the things, just from a logistics standpoint, Sunday and Wednesday will be our last two classes in the book of Judges. So we'll be looking at chapter 17 and 18 in next Sunday, and then next Wednesday, Lord willing, we'll conclude the book of Judges, looking at chapters 19 through 21. And when you really get down to that, by the way, it's tough reading when you get into those chapters, because there's a lot of messed up stuff that's happening. But one of the things I think we're going to see is that there's this focus on religious aspects that we'll look at next Sunday, and then there's a focus on societal kind of things. And it started out with some foreign influence. At the beginning of those chapters, we were looking at chapters 1 through 3 when we started this, that hey, there's this societal decline that's happening in the book of Judges, and then there's this religious decline that goes with it, and those two things are really paired at the end of this book too. When we get to that, is that we're going to see really the religious collapse of what's happening. How bad was it? There's these stories that we're going to look at there. And it's how bad was it? Well, we'll see some stories about how bad it got from a religious standpoint. And we'll see some stories about how bad it got on Wednesday about as a society with these things. And it's going to end in civil war, right? Rape and murder and civil war. That's the way the book of Judges ends. And I'll tell you, that's what makes me really impressed with Hannah right now when you get to 1 Samuel. Because that's the time that she lived in those kind of things. Getting a little bit closer, just a reminder of what we talked about from last week. But chapter 13 was all about Samson's birth, or really the birth was only a couple of verses in chapter 13. It's really about what led up to these things, that we saw the sin and oppression of Israel. You remember the 40 years of oppression. right? Twice as long, the oppression that we've had there than any other place in the book of Judges. And no one's crying out, right? All these Judges cycle things have been started to really break down. We're going to see words a couple of times today that say, and Samson judged Israel 20 years. It's interesting to call Samson a judge in that way. He doesn't judge in that same way. There's no national army that goes out and does some of these stuff where he's the leader of it. None of that exists with Samson. He's not that kind of judge. But we see the angel appears first to his mother and then appears to them both, which really brings, what's the big message? Anybody remember about the message and what they need to pay attention to before Samson's birth? Yeah, the Nazirite vow, right? To stay away from anything related to the grapes, right? Nothing to eat, nothing to do with anything related to the grapes. There's also the one we think of all the time, the hair, right? Nazirite is not to cut their hair. And then also not to touch dead bodies. And all of this kind of systematically seen, all these kind of things. Samson's set up from birth, all these spiritual things that are in place. He's got every spiritual advantage in these things. And then we see chapter 14, what he does with that. He goes and he demands a wife. And I forgot to mention, but the Nazirite vow, right? It's an unusual Nazirite vow. Right now, it's Samson for his life. That's not... And it was decided before he was born that he's into that into that covenant with these things. And we see what he does with all of those things. We see Samson's first marriage. He's killing the lion. He's scraping out with the dead carcass. He's in the valley of Timnah and amongst all these vineyards. And those kind of things. He demands that wife. He kills that lion in Timnah. We see the wedding feast that happens and the wager that he puts to all those things. And we ended with him going out and killing 30 men. And that's really where we pick up. We pick up back in the same, right in the middle of that scene. We kind of left it there from last week. Where we're going to see chapter 15 is all about Samson's revenge. And this is going to be a theme with Samson that he takes it. It's not the Lord's revenge, really, that he's going after, but he's going to say the word "I" a lot in some of these things. But God is using those things. So we're going to see his retaliation at Timnah, right, after that wedding feast. We're going to see the men of Judah, that scene, verses 9 through 17. The thirst after deliverance, such a interesting picture after that. That happens, that he's crying out for being thirsty. And then chapter 16 is the chapter we know really well, right? Samson and Delilah. And we'll look at that this morning as well, that he visits a prostitute in Gaza, the things that happen there. Delilah, if you think about it in terms of his feats, by the way, it's just kind of what I do. It's when he's carrying those gates. We see Delilah's 3 failed traps, and then the one that works, 4 attempts. Such an interesting thing if you think about what's going on in Samson's mind right there. Samson's captured, and then we see the final revenge and his death that happens at the end of this chapter here. But that's where we're going to go. Does somebody mind being the first reader of the first 8 verses? Tom, if you don't mind, and then I'll get you next, Ken.
After some days, at the time of wheat harvest, Samson went to visit his wife, a young goat, and said, "I will go with my wife into the chamber, but her father would not allow me to go in." Her father said, "I really thought that you utterly hated her, so I gave her to you companion. Is not the younger sister more beautiful than she? Please take her instead." Samson said to them, "This time I shall be innocent in regard to the Philistines when I do them harm." So Samson went and caught 3,000 foxes and took torches. And he turned them tail to tail and put a torch between each pair of tails. And when he had set fire to the torches, he let the foxes go into the standing grain of the Philistines. They set fire to the scattered grain and the standing grain as well as the olive orchards.
Okay. Oh, sorry, I forgot where it left. Go ahead.
The Philistines said, "Who has done this?" And they said, "Samson, the son-in-law of the Timnite, because he has taken his wife."
All right, so this is, like we said, we're starting in the middle of the story here as we look at chapter 15. But the last we saw Samson at the end of chapter 14, he killed the 30 Philistines. He gave them their changes of clothes because they, as he said, right, his words, they plowed with his heifer, found out his riddle. So he gives them the change of clothes, and then he goes back home, right? He goes to his father's house, and it says he does that in hot anger. So whenever we get to chapter 15, some amount of time has passed, right? Where he decides that he's going to go back to his wife, and that's where we see this scene happen. The father doesn't let him go. I wasn't going to leave her at the altar, which is such a weird, I guess, cultural kind of thing. But I wasn't going to leave her at the altar, so the best man is now married to what was going to be your wife. And Samson looks at this, and I'm curious what you think about this statement. Is Samson look at this and says, well, this time I'm going to be innocent in regard to the Philistines. What do you think? What do you think about that? Any thoughts there?
He thinks he's justified.
Yeah.
What they've done to him. Because that's the mentality of the world, right? I will do unto them as they have done unto me. So he's just completely in line with a worldly mentality of retaliation.
Yeah. Yeah, and it really gets into this sort of Hatfield and McCoy kind of back and forth as we go, especially through chapter 15 here, in some of these things. And then we know this story, right? But Samson takes 300 foxes. This one's, some of these are easier and harder for me to picture. This one I have a hard time picturing in my mind, right? What does it mean to catch 300 foxes? Or I think some translations, even jackals, like kind of mentioned that. I don't think the animal matters too much, but 300 of them, 150 torches, and allows us to go. And this is at the time of that wheat harvest. Yeah, Rodney?
Back to the last question, just before that, because that his riddle, he killed 30 men. I mean, killed. It had nothing to do with the situation particularly. And so I guess at this time he said, well, okay, maybe I wasn't justified before, but I am now.
Yeah. Yeah, and there's kind of this escalation too with threes, right? It starts out with these 30 men. We're at 300 foxes, and then there's going to be 3,000 men of Judah here in a second as we go through this story. So it's interesting that there is an escalation, I think, that's happening there, even in just those numbers. I don't know, by the way. In my mind, I feel like I know Samson's really strong, but it'd be hard to hold 300 foxes in his hands. So it feels to me like this maybe even took some time that he's doing this. Maybe this was over the harvest season or something, where he's doing these kind of things. But obviously, it causes a lot of damage that happens through here. It happens in the time of the wheat harvest that comes through there, and then. Who had done this, and the Philistines came up and burned her and her father with fire. You know, this is something that got threatened a lot, right? They threatened this in the time of Jephthah. The 30 men who wanted to get this, they threatened it. Were their threats serious when it comes to that wedding feast? This is how she was really going to die in this way. It's hard to imagine that, but it's what's going on in the times that they're living in.
One other thing, it's interesting, Samson only thinks about himself. Now I will be justified. It's never about the Lord. It's never about the people. It's just about him. And that's going to be true through the end of even at the end of his life. It's all, about what I will want in connection with what they've done to me.
There's pieces of that that's hard for me to square the circle a little bit, right? But I will say, Samson is one of those characters. Then you look at things like Hebrews, and the word faith is talked about with Samson. And I say, the one thing I know is this, is I'm left with the impression, what a God, when you look at Samson. Yeah, buddy.
What I've noticed in this chapter so far is there is no mention of God. And the first mention is in verse 14, where it says the Spirit of the Lord. And then it goes all the way down to 18, almost the end of the chapter, before
And that's the book of Judges. The Judges, the further we get into Judges, the less and less God is mentioned in some of these things. And then we see these kind of statements again. If this is what I do, I swear I will be avenged on you, and after that I will quit. The after that I will quit is interesting, right? Because you think about what's happening so far in all of this, and I even just listing what's up till now, right? Samson deals this really great blow is kind of the idea. We don't know how many people he killed here in this, but why did he do that? He did that because they burned up his fiancée, I'll call her, and his father-in-law. And they did that because Samson burned their fields. And why did Samson burn their fields? They did that because the father gave his wife away. He did that because Samson left in hot anger. Samson left in hot anger because they knew his riddle. And he killed those 30 Philistines. And he told the riddle because she was afraid of getting burned. And it keeps going back and back and back and back and back over and over again. You get this kind of compounding of all these things that happens. And then Samson goes away, right? He leaves the situation here. He goes into the rock of Edom. And I was trying to remember what that meant, by the way, which, again, Samson's stomping grounds are in this area is where he spends his whole life. But he's in Edom now, which means lair of wild beasts, which I thought was interesting in that. So that's where he is now. And we see this kind of escalation. We get to the men of Judah, which is such an interesting one too. Verse 9 through 17. Ken, do you mind reading this one?
Then the Philistines came up and encamped in Judah and made a raid on them. And the men of Judah said, Why have you come up against us? They said, We have come up to bind Samson and to do him as he did to us. And 3,000 men of Judah went down to the cleft of the rock of Edom and said to Samson, Do you not know that the Philistines are rulers over us? What then is this that you have done to us? And he said to them, As they did to me, so have I done to you. And they said to him, We have come down to bind you, that we may give you into the hands of the Philistines. And Samson said to them, Swear to me that you will not attack me yourself. They said to him, No, we will only bind you and give you into your hands. We will surely not kill you. So they bound him with 2 new ropes and brought him up to the rock. When he came to the other, the Philistines kept shouting to meet him. Then the Spirit of the Lord rushed upon him, and the ropes that were on his arms became as flax that has caught fire, and his bonds melted off his hand. And he found a fresh jawbone of a donkey, and put out his hand and took it. And with it he struck 1,000 men. And Samson said, With the jawbone of a donkey, heaps upon heaps, with the jawbone of a donkey, I struck down 1,000 men. As soon as he had finished speaking, he threw away the jawbone out of his hand, and that place was called Ramah.
Okay. Few things I want to kind of key in on this statement, or these things in this passage, but I want to look a little bit at the men of Judah. What do you think about them approaching, right? The Philistines come down, they say, hey, in one way or another, they say, hey, we'll deal with this. They bring 3,000 men. Samson's fresh off of killing several. Now they come to him and they say this, do you not know that the Philistines are rulers over us? What then is this that you have done to us? What do you think about that statement? I'll tell you what's in my mind. This is about as close as the opposite, I think, as you can get to crying out to the Lord about your oppressors. We've gone from, in the beginning of the book of Judges, now don't forget that they've done evil in the sight of the Lord, and once they've been oppressed for a while, it's been 6 years, 8 years, 18 years sometimes before the people reach out to God, and then they cry out to God because they've realized some of the things, and God raises up a Savior. This time they didn't do any crying out to God, and when there is someone doing something about some of these things, they go to him and they say, what are you doing, Samson? Do you not realize that they rule over us? Stop kicking the oppressors, Samson. They're content in their oppression. And we probably don't have time to spend too much on it, but isn't that like what sin is? Doesn't it become that way? Yeah, buddy.
It's interesting that this is Judah, because what Judah becomes. Like Judah is that's where Jesus came from. Like that's the tribe.
Yeah.
And this is, I mean, I guess this is their lowest.
Yeah, there's some bad things in Judah, by the way. There really are. Like even Judah himself, right? You look at some of the worst passages in the book of Genesis, it's Judah, right? And his sons. First people struck dead, right? Yes, sir.
Also ties back quite nicely to when Moses and Aaron first appear before Pharaoh, tell him to let their people go, and then Pharaoh says, okay, well then we're not going to even give you guys the proper materials to make the brick. You have to go out and get it yourselves and still meet the quota. And then the leaders, after they've been oppressed more because of this, they tell Moses and Aaron, like, essentially, what are you guys doing? Make things worse for us by going before Pharaoh.
Yeah. Man, I tell you, I think, and when we talk about his thirst, I'll bring up more of this, but I think when, I heard somebody say it this way, I think, is when Samson is not rescuing Israel, he's busy being Israel. And he's almost this caricature of Israel, I think, in a lot of these ways. I do think it's interesting, there's kind of this circular reference that goes on, why is this happening? The Philistines guys, because Samson did this, and Samson goes, because they did it to me. You got that finger pointing that's there. And then Samson, there's an interesting statement, as long as you swear that you will not attack me yourselves, I'll go quietly. I think that's super interesting. Maybe I've seen people say things like that at least he's not, trying to kill his own people and things like that. Maybe that's a little bit of a redemption kind of quality with Samson in some of this. But God is with him, right? The Spirit rushed upon him. And it would be interesting to see ropes melt off like flax. I don't know if you've seen that, just wispy, think kindling, right? Little wispy, almost kind of cotton-looking fibers that are there, but it just broke completely, melted off of him, and he's able to do these things. And we get some alarm bells, right, that should be going off in our mind because he picks up a fresh jawbone. What does it mean to be fresh? It's a dead body. But he's using this, and God is still with him, by the way. We know this story, right? We know when God left him, and Samson didn't know, by the way, that he had left him. But he didn't leave him when he was in the vineyards of Timnah. He didn't leave him when he was in those feasts. He didn't leave him when he's going in and touching this dead lion. He doesn't leave him when he's doing this. These are all things that violate these Nazirite vows that are coming into place. And we see this, and they names it Ramoth Lehi. Means height of the jawbone. Lehi itself just means jaw. So all through this little bit of the story, you see that piece in there. And then we get to this, and I'll go ahead and read 18 through 20, where it says, "And he was very thirsty, and he called upon the Lord and said," I'm not sure if that's a prayer or not, by the way, when he does this. You could maybe call it a prayer or yelling out. I'm not sure. I kind of imagine the second. And he said, "You have granted this great salvation by the hand of your servant, and shall I now die of thirst and fall into the hands of the uncircumcised?" And God split open the hollow place that is in Lehi, and the water came from it. And when he drank, his spirit returned and revived, and therefore the name of it was in Hakor and at Lehi to this day. And he judged Israel in the days of the Philistines 20 years. What an odd little story, isn't it? He's calling on the name of the Lord. Again, I don't know if you call that a prayer or if he's yelling this out or what, but he's addressing God in this way. I think what I'd call it is more of a complaint right now. That you've saved me, and now all you've done is brought me out here to die. It's kind of that picture, I think, that's in here. And what do you guys think about this scene? Any comments? Anybody wants to make? Rich?
Well, it just mirrors the Israel when they left Egypt.
Yeah.
Why you brought us out here to die? They kept complaining.
I see that over and over again, and maybe I'm kind of stuck on this. Maybe it's just the first time I've really kind of seen this going through Samson right now. But even things like the Nazirite vow, right? What an odd kind of thing when it comes to Judges. But here, Samson's got this covenant that's decided before he's born, that he's expected to be part of this. But in this, God's giving him every spiritual advantage to do these things. But there's certain things that he must do. And at every turn, he disregards it. He throws it away. He doesn't treat it like the respect it deserves. He doesn't treat it with all the care that he should give these kind of things. Over and over and over again, he's going after these foreign women. They influence him in this kind of way. He doesn't give respect to the covenant and dead bodies and the grapes and all those kind of things. And when God delivers him with a great victory, he goes, what are you going to do? Leave me to die for thirst? Man, it just reminds me of Israel over and over and over again. And when it comes to when God leaves him, even that, over and over and over again, God was with Israel, even though they kept doing things against God. Until one day, he's not with them. Then we get to even the splitting of the rock. I just think over and over again, just kind of this picture book, kind of these characters of these things. The name means just the fountain of one who called, those kind of things. And then we get this statement, which I think is really interesting too, because it says, and Samson judged Israel for 20 years. And this is our cue, right? We've done this enough times in the book of Judges where this sounds like the end. And now we go on to the next judge, right? But this isn't where the story ends. We're going to see this statement again. That is the end of the life, right? It's going to say 20 years both again when we get here. But now we're going to get that statement. We're going to find out one more thing about Samson in this. Any other comments that somebody wants to make, buddy?
This kind of reminds me a little bit of Adam and Eve too, when the serpent's like, but will you really die?
Yeah.
But he's not going to really die if I touch a dead body or
Yeah.
do all of these things.
And you know, it says, right, the scriptures say in this that, you know what, he's going to begin to save them from the Philistines. And it's like, has that really happened? So when you turn the page over to chapter 16, it's kind of like, well, maybe it's better next time. Maybe we'll find out something good this time. And then we get to these next three verses. Somebody might be in the reader here. Clint, you're looking at it.
Samson went to Gaza, and there he saw a prostitute and went into her. The Gazites were told, Samson has come here, and they surrounded the place and set an ambush for him all night at the gate of the city. They kept quiet all night, saying, let us wait till the light of the morning, then we will kill him. Samson waited till midnight. At midnight he arose and took hold of the doors of the gate of the city and the two posts, and he pulled them up, bar and all, and put them on his shoulders, and carried them to the top of the hill that is in front of Hebron.
Man, Samson. Every time you turn the page, if you try, I've tried really hard in like the book of Judges and Samson and stuff like that. It's like try not to think about what you know about these chapters and kind of turn the page like that. And it's like every time he goes to this prostitute. And again, my mind's on that picture of Israel. Well, how does God describe what Israel's doing in the religious sense?
Playing the harlot.
They have played the harlot, whoring after other gods. These are words that are in the book of Judges. Samson is literally doing what the nation is doing spiritually in these kind of things. And again, they're ambush him, go in the morning. He gets up at midnight and carries these gates. That's another one. It's hard to imagine what this looks like, but the gates are heavy. And you look at this, we're talking about from Gaza, which is a Philistine city, by the way. He spends a lot of time in these Philistine cities and goes to Hebron, about 40 miles. Talks about the gates and the posts and the bars and all. He's carrying this over. Samson feels obviously unstoppable at this point. With the God is always with him, and he's getting very used to that in that sense. Then we get into the story that we know. Let's go ahead for time's sake. We're not terrible on time. Somebody mind reading this one though? 16 verses 4 through 9. Go ahead, Daniel.
After this, he loved a woman in the valley of Sorek, whose name was Delilah. And the lords of the Philistines came up to her and said to her, seduce him and see where his great strength lies, about what means we might overpower him, that we may bind him and humble him. And we will each give you 1,100 pieces of silver. So Delilah said to Samson, please tell me where your great strength lies and how you might be bound, that one could subdue you. Samson said to her, if they bind me with 7 fresh bowstrings that have not been dried, then I shall become weak, be like any other man. So the lords of the Philistines brought up to her 7 fresh bowstrings that had not been dried, and she bound him with them. Now she had men lying in ambush in an inner chamber, and she said to him, the Philistines are upon you, Samson. But he snapped the bowstrings as if a thread of flax snaps when it touches the fire. So the secret of his strength was not known.
Okay. So it's easy, because again, we know this story. We know it's going to take 4 times. It's easy to maybe look at Samson and make a good argument for Samson's being an idiot, right? It's really easy to make that argument when here. And I think, I tell you what, verse 4 here really strikes me as, you want to know the reason for all this? It says in verse 4 that Samson loved Delilah. And I don't think we can forget that. Because I also don't think Samson's dumb in some of this. But man, he keeps going back. Keeps going back. And I think we've known people in those kind of situations, right? And why is this happening? This is Samson. Samson loved Delilah. Delilah does not love Samson. Delilah does not love the Lord, is the picture here. Interesting, by the way, the name Sorek, I've got some stuff on it. I'll skip a bunch of it. But it does mean red grape or choice vine or red grapes, which I think is interesting, again, in context of this. But the lords of the Philistines come and they make her an offer. They say, I want you to seduce him in these things, and we'll give you 1,100 pieces of silver. That's an interesting one. You know, I spent some time trying to quantify some things when it comes to 1,100 pieces of silver and what that means. And I actually listened to a couple things that I think helped me understand this a little bit more. It's really hard to quantify when you talk about today versus what that really is. Jack, did you have something?
Well, it says that we will each give you 1,100. So
Yeah.
how many of them were there? There could be 10 of them.
Well, so I'll say this, right? It's definitely more than 1,100 that's in there. I think some of the things I've seen, some of the best guesses that are in here, there are 5 cities of the Philistines. So if you just asked me to guess at what I would think, when we're talking about those 5 cities, Gaza is one of them, by the way. Ashdod is one of them, where he was, is it Akron or Ashdod? One of the A ones. They're both Philistine cities, but it's the ones he killed the 30 men for him. But here's the lords of these. I think it could have been 5, really, really easily. But you think about this amount, and here's a couple notes I think that are good to know. And this one might be hard to pin, but you know how many pieces of silver Joseph's brothers sold him into slavery for? 20, really close. Yeah, 20 pieces of silver. The law of Moses, there were 30 pieces of silver if someone ever killed your slave accidentally. You got 30 pieces of silver. That was part of it. I think the most telling one to me is, hopefully we'll get to this next week when we talk about how bad was it. There's this guy named Micah, and we're gonna talk about him, but he wants his own personal priest. And when he goes, and part of the deal is, he says, you know what? I'm gonna pay you 10 pieces of silver a year. Right around this same time. And the priest says, yes. So when they come to Delilah and they say 1,100 pieces of silver, each of us, it's an amazing amount of money. Akron and Ashdod and Gaza and Ekron and Gath, it's a huge amount of money. And I don't see any resistance from Delilah. You know what she does when they offer that kind of money? By the way, if you just calculate the 10 pieces of silver and say that's a year's wage, it's the closest we got, right? to this, and there's 5 cities. We're talking about 550 years of wages, if you want to put it in that kind of context. That's the picture of what she's being offered. And what does she do with that money? So Delilah said to Samson, please tell me where your great strength lies and how you might be bound that you could subdue you. She's happy to take that money in here. What do you think's in Samson's mind when she asked this first time? If you just look at his statement, oh yeah, I'm sorry.
I mean, he has to know that she has an ulterior motive because he gives her the wrong answer.
He loves her, but he doesn't trust her. That's an interesting place to be. And I think that's where Samson is. He doesn't kick her to the curb, but he lies to her. And so they get in this cycle. The bowstrings I've seen people talk about, usually they're made out of animal things and fresh. Part of some interesting things in there is if they're fresh, when they dry, they shrink, especially if they're out of animal tendons and things like that. These bowstrings, but they tie, I don't think it really matters, honestly. But he tells her something, he's able to break that. And she tells him, the lords of the Philistines are upon you. And now she had men lying in ambush. They were ready for this thing. You wonder what they talked about after that, by the way? I don't know what it looked like. It's hard to imagine, right, those kind of things. But we see that picture. But this scene kind of goes over and over again. But let's go ahead and read the next one. Somebody mind reading this one? Jason, and then I'll come back and get you.
Then Delilah said to Samson, behold, you have mocked me and told me lies. Please tell me how you might be bound. He said to her, they bind me with new ropes that have not been used, and I shall become weak and be like any other man. So Delilah took new ropes and bound him with them, and said to him, the Philistines are upon you, Samson, and the men lying in ambush were in the inner chamber. But he snapped ropes off his arms like a thread. Then Delilah said to Samson, until now you have mocked me and told me lies. Tell me how you might be bound. And he said to her, if you weave the 7 locks of my head with the web and fasten it tight with a pin, then I shall become weak and be like any other man. Pulled away, I'm sorry, we've got the sentence again. If you weave the 7 locks of my head with the web and fasten it tight with a pin, then I shall become weak like any other man. Pull away the pin, the loom, and the web.
I'm sure that's a copy-paste error, by the way. Sorry about that.
I have a little trouble seeing it. It looks like a period is after man. Anyways, verse 14. So while he slept, Delilah took the 7 locks of his head and wove them into the web. And she made them tight with a pin, and said to him, the Philistines are upon you, Samson. But he awoke from his sleep. Okay, so this is really similar. So did I move a sentence? Yeah. I'm sure that's copy-paste error, moving things around in here. But sorry about that. But you imagine being his wife for a minute, or girlfriend. I don't know what this is, right? They're acting like husband and wife right now. But imagine what kind of conversations would happen after this, and I don't know if this is right away. But you imagine, say, even when she does these kind of things, you imagine, are you okay? What's going on? I bet those ropes hurt. What, all those kind of things. She doesn't say any of that. She says, you've lied to me, and you've mocked me in some of these things. So they go through this again. Philistines are upon you, Samson. You've mocked me again. They go around and round about these kind of things, and then able to do over and over again. Weave the 7 locks. The Philistines are upon you, Samson, and then we get all the way through attempt 2 and 3 now, right? Over and over and over again. And Samson, is he dumb right now?
Nobody's lying.
He's lying a lot. I don't think God's condoning that either. But man, he stays. He knows what she's going to do. The only reason he stays right now, the only reason we've given in the text is, but he loves her. So he's doing something to stay with her. Somebody have something over here? John, and then Jason.
Well, I think it's arrogance on his part, and it's almost like it's a game to him now.
Yeah.
He knows what she's going to do, so he's say, oh, nothing's going to stop whatever's going on, and I can just tell her whatever, it's okay.
I don't think it's a game. I don't think, that one thing, so I'll tell you this, going in here, and let me go to here and I'll tell you why. Because he's telling her all his heart. Let's see, where was it? So when we get to the fourth time, and we'll read this, how can you say, I love you in your heart when it's not me? And he mocked me these 3 times. You have not told me where the great staying lies. And she pressed him hard with all her words day and night and urged him. And his soul was vexed to death. And the reason I don't think it's a game to him right now is because I don't think it would be described as vexed to death in that sense. And that's one thing I'm studying for this and going back through it. I changed my mind a little bit about some of these things. Buddy, and then Tom.
I think this is similar to the very first thing when he wanted a wife in the Philistines, because it was from the Lord. And so the Philistines can take revenge, or not revenge, but he could do the Lord's doing. And here, he's...
I'm not sure Samson knew that, though.
No, I know.
Because it says, for they didn't know it was of the Lord, right, when we get to that one.
Now, he's in trouble, but he actually helps him when he pulls the pillars.
Yeah. For time, let me read this one. And she said to him, how can you say, I love you, and that your heart is not with me? If you have mocked me these 3 times, and you have not told me where your great strength lies. And when she pressed him hard with her words in that day, she urged him, and his soul was vexed to death. And he told her all his heart, and said to her, a razor has never come upon my head, and I have been a Nazarite to God from my mother's womb. And in my head is shaved, and my strength will leave me, and I shall become weak like any other man. And when Delilah saw that he had told her all his heart, she sent and called the lords of the Philistines, saying, come up again. And he has told me all his heart. 3 times, by the way, that's mentioned now. All his heart, all his heart, all his heart. Then the lords of the Philistines came up to her and brought the money in their hands, and she made him sleep on her knees, and she called a man and had him shave 7 locks of his head. Heavy sleeper, by the way. And then she began to torment him with the strength and left him. And she said, the Philistines are upon you, Samson. And he awoke from his sleep and said, I will go out as other times and shake myself free. But he did not know the Lord had left him. And the Philistines seized him and gouged out his eyes and brought him down to Gaza and bound him with bronze shackles in the ground in the middle of the prison. And their hair of his head began to grow again after it had been shaved. A couple of things, I'll say a few things, and we'll open it up for a couple questions. But again, over and over and over again, 3 times, he said everything that was in his heart. I don't think I highlighted the third one. But a razor shall never touch my head. He mentions these things, the Nazarite vow. Let me just ask this, in case we don't get to it on some of this. Where did Samson's strength lie? With God. Lie with God. This hair becomes this symbol of things. But Samson's strength relied with God. In some of this. And you know what, by the way, it doesn't say in these verses, it doesn't say Samson got up and didn't notice that however many years of hair was gone. I think he'd notice that, by the way. It'd be pretty noticeable if you have never had a haircut before. And then it says, but I'm going to shake myself free like any of the other times. Samson's getting closer and closer to these things. Man, he still thinks God's with him. And isn't it like that picture of Israel, though? Israel did so many things to violate God, but God was still with them. God still did things for them all throughout their history until one day he wasn't. And I think that's the picture of Samson. And man, she tormented him. She didn't have to do that. She had the money. This was all about money, but she tormented him in this way. We get that picture again that the hair was going to go back. We're almost out of time, and I got to get to the end of Samson. It is poetic, by the way. This man whose eyes have been getting him in trouble so much, they gouge out his eyes. But I'll paraphrase some of this, and we'll make maybe some comments at the end. But they bring him to Gaza, and he's been there for some amount of time, but the hairs begin to grow back. They decide to have this feast to Dagon, their god, our God who has given Samson into our hands. They praise their God, our God who has given our enemy into our hand. And we know God doesn't stand for that kind of thing with this. So they called out Samson to the prison and entertained them, that they'd be between the pillars. And on the roof, by the way, I don't know how many were underneath, but on the roof it says there was about 3,000 people here. And then we get to Samson's prayer, and I wish we had more time to spend on Samson's prayer that's here, because there's things that bother me a ton about this. But Samson has a prayer. And he turns to God and he says this, "Oh Lord God, please remember me. And please strengthen me only this once, God, that I may be avenged on the Philistines for my 2 eyes." I love the first part of that prayer, by the way. Samson is turning to God, and when he's asking him to remember, we talked about this before, I won't belabor it, but when God remembers, he acts. I think that's what Samson's asking for in these things. But then I wish I could change the second half of that prayer, because I want revenge on my eyes. But again, Samson's mentioned in like Hebrews chapter 11. And that prayer makes me think, what a God. What a God in these things. And then he bowed with all his strength in the house upon the Lord's and upon all the people who were with it. So the dead that he killed in his death were more than those he killed during his whole life. Right? This was a big thing that happened. And then they took him and they buried him in his hometown, essentially. And he had judged Israel for 20 years. Any final comments? I didn't do justice to the end. Sorry for the timing on that. Any last comments? Anybody want a last word on any of the last couple things? Kids are there. But thank you for the time. Appreciate the class.